Thanks so much for joining us. This has been a bit of a crazy time. So, a couple questions for you. I'm sure you've all been hearing how bad the COVID-19 pandemic is, and you're probably looking for ways to protect yourself and your family. Maybe you're getting tired of getting stuck at home, like with your kids. Like I'm here with my daughter all the time, and I love it. But at the same time, it's kind of getting a little bit challenging because we're not getting the space that we're used to in that little school break. And other things are, how would you love to be able to utilize this time to strengthen your bond with your family and even to, get into the kitchen with your kids and have them help cook and then actually eat some healthy, nourishing food. So these are the things that I've been really wanting to do, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to bring a panel of experts together to talk about that. So my name is Dr. Tom Moorcroft. I created the Coronavirus Voices of Reason mini summit that we did a couple weekends ago. We had over 1,500 people live, and we had over 4,500 people register for the replay. And I was just completely blown away by the support that we got for that event, and I knew we could do a lot more. So with the pandemic continuing, and we had a whole bunch of new challenges arising, and especially since many of us are, as I mentioned, stuck home day and night with our families. So I heard a lot of people talking, calling the office, sending me messages saying that we needed more resources to help ourselves and our families to not just get by, but to actually thrive during these challenging times. So many parents have reached out looking for guidance on how they can use this time to inspire their children and how to take the next step to kind of up-level their health and to create lifelong health habits in themselves and in their families. So I decided that we should probably dive a little deeper into these topics, and that's why I created this mini-series. Over the next 3 days, we're going to be hearing from experts in all aspects of health, from hormones and fasting to healing autoimmune disorders with food, and even how to cook food with your family and, believe it or not, actually make it kind of fun. you know, we're going to talk about how to talk to our kids about this, and what we can do to support our children and ourselves in the event that maybe we have a difficult time focusing. I mean, so many of my children in my practice have pre-existing executive function and focus issues. And so now they're at home, and parents are, might not be used to helping them in a school sort of situation. And then I also find that while I can focus really well, I'm getting distracted just by being in a different environment. So we're going to talk about that and how to really get focused. And what if you think you or your children have COVID-19, or, and then what can you do? What kind of herbs could you take? Is there a role for mindset in changing this? And what is the role of food in all of this as well? And then also, what about dreaming, and future building? We're going to dive into all of these things. So the question to me really is, how are you going to get through this? And because we're all going to get through, but how are we going to use that time to create an amazing future for ourselves and our families, and to teach our children that they can design their own future? The really cool part about all this is I'm so excited to share that in addition to all the 9 experts we have joining us, we have a very special guest, visionary, inspirational speaker, and dream builder, Mary Morrissey, will help us kind of bring our mini-series to an end, but really create a beginning to our whole new lives at the end of this. So over the next 3 days, we're going to hear from experts, and they're going to be sharing their professional opinion and what they've been doing with patients and in their expertise. But also, we're going to check in and see what they're doing at home, because we're all kind of dealing with the same situation together. You're going to hear from doctors who have actually personally had COVID-19, the things they did to get better, and more importantly, at least to me, is how did that impact them personally and their families? And I'm also going to make sure that every night we get a little bit of a brief update on what's going on with COVID-19. And tonight, I'm super happy to let you know that the total number of new cases in the US, as well as the total number of new deaths, actually seems to be kind of on the downward now, finally. I don't know if that's going to hold up, but I mean, certainly there is a little breath of fresh air in that. But I really don't want to be focused so much on sort of all the medical stuff we've seen in the news. Let's let the doctors and researchers focus on that. I want to focus on the information that we need to make really good decisions for our own health. so that we can empower you with the knowledge and the tools to thrive now and into the future. Because almost all the healing strategies that we're going to be talking about and that we're going to share with you during this event are going to be applicable not only now, but in the rest of your life. And that's really super important to me. So I'm glad you decided to join us. Remember, we are recording this event. So a few days after we're done, we're going to make sure that everybody gets an email giving you full and free access to the replay. You can also share the event link with anyone you like. Feel free to join, they can join us live. They can jump in tomorrow night and Wednesday night, and then they also will have access to the replay too. So just, send them the same link you used to sign up. That'd be great. We're also going to be streaming to YouTube in the event that anybody has any issues with Zoom. And the last piece before we dive right into the meat of everything tonight is when you do receive that replay link, you're going to receive access to a lot more information about each speaker, a little bit more about who they are, and also a lot of them have free gifts and resources to share. So I'm really excited to be able to dive right in. So tonight, our first guest is a really good friend of mine, Cynthia Thurlow. She's a nurse practitioner and women's hormone expert who is a nutrition expert. And, I think I first heard about her as the person who did this insane TED Talk about intermittent fasting that's gotten well over 5 million views. Like, I don't even understand that number. But anyway, we'll learn a lot more about Cynthia in a second. So Cynthia, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, this is so much fun. So how have things been going? I mean, what's been going on in your world with the family and
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I have a 12-year-old and 14-year-old, so 2 middle schoolers, one of whom takes 3 high school classes. And my county has effectively told the kids whatever they got, the average grade for first, second, and third quarter is going to be their yearly grade. And they're not really doing a lot of new instruction. So even though I'm in this, fairly affluent county, parents are really left with overseeing a lot of busy work and trying to find, where we can navigate this new normal. So my kids were very disappointed that I put them in a writing class, and my older son is taking a geometry class, but we are definitely have kind of gotten into a groove. Our dogs are loving having everyone home.
Right.
But, I have boys and they're used to being really physically active. And so creating WODs or workout of the day and getting them on their bikes and getting them outside and, doing a lot of cooking. And as you can imagine, teenage boys have massive appetites. And so one of the things my husband and I have had to navigate is the amount of food we've had to stock in the house to keep everyone happy. And so now we give them a menu every day. And that has made our lives a little easier because it was a free-for-all the first couple of weeks till we realized that we had to scale back a little bit. Otherwise, there would be no food in the house. So we're doing well. We've created new schedules and new rituals. And I try to explain to the kids, even though you're not in school, we can't stay up late every single night. And
right.
They get some unfettered electronics access, which they don't normally have. So I think their quality of life, given the circumstances, is not bad right now.
It's so funny because in the very beginning, it was like school came, they actually had somebody drive and bring us a whole bunch of paperwork. And this is what we're going to do for school. And our school really got right on top of it. And then it's kind of like they're doing meetings every day, but in between, it's like, here's a 10-year-old who has to do hours of self-directed learning.
Correct. Well, I don't know what's worse, that or our school district, they probably have an hour and a half of work a day, because if they do it diligently, then it all gets done. But there's nothing like being in a classroom with a teacher and, parents are working. And I have to really give it to homeschooling parents, because that's a whole other, skill set that I did not possess before.
Right.
But, we're trying to, stay on top of it. There's, it is really a challenge, I think, for every family that's out there. We're all trying to navigate this new normal.
Right. Well, it's like our daughter Talia. I mean, she's just like, let's do homeschool. Let's go homeschool. We'll do skiing in the morning and I can do school in the afternoon, the evening. And I'm like, yeah, that's going to take a lot of a schedule. And then we started doing this because we were forced.
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't know that we can do that.
I know
So,
it's challenging. It's really challenging. So we've had to kind of institute morning is schoolwork, then around lunchtime you get a break, then you get some free time, and then there's another class, like a structured class, in the afternoon from 3 to 5. And then I try to get as much work done from 3 to 5 as I can while
oh,
they're
I know, right?
class.
Well, I think that that's one of the things we're all going through is we've got a bunch of like, I'm home and my wife is home, but we actually are still working. And
Yes.
then like our kids want access, have so much more access to us right now. I mean, how are you guys? Is the schedule really helping or?
It's helping a little bit in terms of expectations because we went through a whole process of, oh, I'm just going to sleep till 10 because my parents won't let me have electronics till 12. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. We're going to get up at 8. We're going to shower. We're going to make our beds. Uh, I would say that my introverted son doesn't so much care about access because he only comes around if he really wants something. My extrovert is the one who's actually struggled more. And so trying to facilitate things to keep him busy. I mean, we've got puzzles and, book reading and, scavenger hunts. I mean, as many things as we can to keep him, entertained
Mhm.
within reason. He'll go off and do something for the scavenger hunt and come back. But it's definitely been interesting. I think it is. I think the first, when we were 2 weeks in, I think that was when I was having the most trouble. Like one day it rained. I've been doing workouts in the morning and then taking the dogs for a walk in the afternoon. It's the only time of the day that I don't have to talk. So I've savored that time. And one day I got outside and it started to rain. I almost cried. And I
Oh my
started to
God.
realize like that was if I could just get that hour walk in, I just felt so much better. I could kind of like come back and be renewed and could come back into the house. And as an introvert, it's definitely been a challenge. So
Yeah, it's like you're on all the time. Like
yes.
I'm kind of the opposite of the introvert, like by a long shot, but I'm valuing a few minutes of just
Mhm.
privacy,
Yes.
you
Oh,
know.
there's no privacy. Someone asked me, oh, can you, and I was like, no, there is no privacy. Unless I'm on my walk with the dogs in the neighborhood, there's no privacy. It's
And like
all
mom and
gone.
dad time,
Yeah. No, oh, that's
right?
gone. Totally
Right.
gone.
Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely been a huge challenge. I mean, so what's it like for the boys being locked in a house with someone who's got your medical expertise? And I remember we were talking, previously on your podcast about what you're making them do and what you're not making them do. And I think it's so insightful to understand, like, here we are, like medical experts, experts in holistic healing and health. Yet there's a reality to this. So what are you
Yes.
telling your kids to do during this? And how are you taking your expertise and kind of, you
Well,
know, making it real
yeah,
and
I mean,
doable?
I think it's hard because I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. So they can obviously, if they wanted to access the news, they can read I can't insulate them completely. And so they've heard me and my husband talking, and I don't ever want them to come from a place of fear. I want them to have information. So we have open discussions about what's going on and about why they can't go to the stores with us and why, once a week I go to the grocery store, I'm by myself, and I procure all these groceries, which you bring in, then it's this long process of cleaning everything before it gets put away. And so, a lot of it is getting them actively involved in meal planning and, having fun foods around. I think anyone that knows me, my kind of standard mantra is moderation, not deprivation. And so I think it's
Mm,
woefully unrealistic if I think my kids aren't going to want to have fun foods. And so I get them actively involved in the planning process, and then I get better buy-in. So having middle schoolers who oftentimes think their parents are the least cool people in the world, which is hard to accept, but I've gotten there. I find that we do better when we have meals together. So we have very structured dinner times. Like we all sit down and eat dinner, try to most days. Lunch, they kind of get to do, it's kind of a free for all in terms of they eat when they want to.
hmm
But they're also navigating having they've got a lot more chores because there are no cleaners. There's no one coming to clean the house anymore. And so, they've been humbled to learn how to dust and vacuum and clean toilets and, clean up after themselves. So I think there's been some degree of a new normal for them that hasn't been bad. And I told them, I said, eventually you'll be a fully functioning adult when you leave the house. You need to do, these are skills you're going to need anyway. So
Well,
trying to
is
get
it
them.
one of the things that you just reminded me of is like growing up, I was so mad when my dad made me help him fix the
Mhm.
toilet or when he made me clean it for my mom or whatever.
Yeah,
But I use this all the time.
right.
And I think I've seen, like, even with our daughter, it's so hard to ask them to do these things. So that's really awesome because it's true. They're going to need it.
Right, right. Like before we started recording, my kids were dry mopping the floors. We have hardwoods, and so they were dry mopping. They were not happy about it, and I said, "You need to be done before 7:55 because I've got to jump on this call, and I can't have you guys making noise." So I think that they've been indoctrinated into a little more meal prep. Things are a bit more structured about food. Definitely structured with chores, and they're expected to get off electronics and contribute and read and do all sorts of, in their minds, these are catastrophic disasters. Like, oh, I can't believe my mother would ask me to do that. I'm like, well, this is reality.
I
I
know,
can't do it
right?
all. Yeah.
Well, think
Yeah.
about it. When we were younger, we didn't have all this electronic I mean, I
No.
remember like Atari with the little
Yeah.
ball that was going
Yeah.
across.
Yeah. Asteroids. Yeah, exactly. Frogger, all those things. And ironically enough, my husband found like his old Atari because his parents never threw anything away, found his old Atari. And so my kids were appalled when he pulled it up. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe you used to
Oh,
play that.
right? Oh my God.
Well, things are more sophisticated. So,
I know, right? Oh my goodness. So I think one of the things that so many of us know you by is intermittent fasting.
mhm.
And I love moderation, not deprivation. So I really wanted to dive in for a minute. Like, what are you telling people in terms of like, how do we optimize our meal choices and the utilization possibly of intermittent fasting, both for just health overall and really specifically prevention or even maybe treatment of a viral illness?
Well, I think when you look at the study data, 24 hours or less of fasting is okay right now. So if someone is interested in doing a 24-hour or less fast, great. I'm really talking to my patients about shortening their feeding window because most of us are less active now that we're
Hmm.
in social isolation. So I'm definitely having conversations about maybe instead of doing a 16-8, 16 hours fasted with an 8-hour feeding window. Some people are doing, an 18-hour fast with a 6-hour feeding window. And they're actually feeling like if they do that, it doesn't matter if they have a piece of chocolate or they have some wine because they're just shortening that window in which they're eating. So that's the first thing. I would say, secondly, still concentrating when you're putting meals together, protein and healthy fats. If you do that combination first, get the protein portions proper, you're going to be satiated. And then, you add in your carbohydrates I always say, if you've earned them. And then making room for having some fun foods. If you want to have popcorn one night, if you want to have a glass of wine, if you want to have a brownie. I mean, last night we had Easter dinner and I made brownies. For some reason, that's what the kids wanted. And we all had a portion and we enjoyed it. And then we were done with it. So I think that you have to be realistic about what foods make your body feel good and which foods don't. And so that generally, will focus people more on quality protein and healthy fats, less on the carbs. So if you have chips, don't do it every night. If you're having dessert, don't do it every night. If you're having wine, probably don't want to do that every night, especially if you're trying to kind of aim to stay with a tightened kind of feeding window. But I think it really depends on, you as an individual. I know I'm getting messages from my patients, and a lot of them are feeling like they're craving sugar. I think a lot of it's people are stressed. And so I always say good, better, best. If you really feel like, you're
Mm.
really struggling, then have a piece of fruit. If the fruit doesn't satisfy it, then, maybe, you have a small piece of dark chocolate. If that doesn't do it, then maybe this is going to be your 1 or 2 nights out of the week that you're going to have a sweet treat, and then just let it be. I'm not a fan of people beating themselves up about food choices. You always say tomorrow's another day. If someone really went overboard, you could just have one meal the following day and then kind of get back to your normal feeding and fasting schedule. And I find those techniques generally make people feel like they've got some control over their circumstances. And certainly, now we're in a position we're not able to just run to the grocery store whenever we want.
Right.
So if certain foods are particularly enticing and problematic, don't buy them. Like, don't put yourself in that situation where you feel like the pantry is calling to you or the refrigerator is calling to you. I'll give you an example. My husband and my boys love ice cream. I don't buy it very often because it doesn't last long. And so because it was Easter weekend, I told them I bought, 2 half gallons, one vanilla, one chocolate of this ice cream they really like. And I told them, I said, when it's gone, I'm not buying more. And so I told them, if you're smart, you'll take a little bit and, you won't eat half the half gallon, which is usually what happens with teenage boys. Their
Right.
appetites are ridiculous. So again, it goes back to moderation, not deprivation. I'm not a fan of people depriving themselves, but also kind of not letting yourself go completely overboard. If you feel like you had a day where you ate too much, then the next day, shorten that feeding window, maybe just have one meal and then get back on track. And that's really the message that I want to share, is that irrespective of what you've eaten the day before, you can get back on track.
Right. Well, so a couple things, like one, like why would we even want to shorten our feeding window? Like what's the benefit of that?
Shortening your feeding window, so longer, you give yourself more bowel rest, so more digestive rest. And you're tapping into this, benefit of autophagy, which is the spring cleaning of the cells. And certainly when we're in this kind of pandemic situation, it allows our bodies the opportunity. If we've been exposed to a virus, doesn't have to be COVID-19. We're exposed to a virus or a bacteria, gives our bodies a little bit more time to clear what is not designed to be there. And you'll oftentimes hear, my grandmother used to say, you starve a fever, you starve, if you're sick, it's really better just to keep yourself
Oh,
really well hydrated. And I think that's also another message. I'm stay super hydrated. That is so, so critical right now. So, there are a lot of things that happen. We know that when we're not eating, we're keeping our insulin really well balanced. We're keeping it low. So sometimes people will feel like they have more energy, more mental clarity, all things that I think can be beneficial, especially if you're trying to work from home as a parent or trying to help your children with their studies or oversee their studies. So lots of benefits. But what I'm finding from, and I'm hearing from a lot of people, is that fasting just seems easier. It gives them one less thing to have to worry about. They don't have to worry about maybe they make breakfast for their children, but then they just go on with their day. And then when
right.
noon comes or 1 o'clock comes, they break their fast. And they're just feeling like they have a little bit of control over a situation where they don't have a lot of control.
So that, oh my gosh, there's so many pieces to dive into, but the big one for me is, at what age do you say we can start fasting, and and below what age are we going to say, you know what, we really do need to have more free reign over sort of our calories?
I would say when you are 18. So generally when young men and young women have stopped growing, that's typically, so a young woman is probably stopped growing by 18. Most young men have stopped growing. So 18 and up, it's certainly a strategy that you can utilize. I always get hate mail when I say this, but if you're 70 or older, I think most people should not be restricting their calories. So, between those parameters, you have a
Right.
pretty large proportion of the population that can certainly benefit from a little bit less in terms of eating hours, because we've been conditioned to believe that we should snack all day long. And it's hard when you're at home and you're conditioned to eat that way. You can really go off the reservation, if you will, in terms of your diet and your your normal eating plans when you're just exposed to food all the time. Some people really do struggle with that emotional connection to food. And so it can be hugely problematic. So I always remind people, when you can stick to this particular window, it can sometimes make you feel like you've got a little bit more control, as opposed to it's just, you know, you're just going to eat from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed. And that doesn't make any of us feel good at all.
No, it seems like we get that quick hit of dopamine or
Mhm.
whatever from our food, and we get that, but then we get into that cycle of not feeling well physically, then we
Mhm.
emotionally beat ourselves up. But I really love intermittent fasting. Breakfast is by far my favorite meal of the day.
Mhm.
I've been really happy because I've been able to eat it around 2 o'clock every day now,
Yeah.
because I don't eat breakfast almost
Mhm.
ever. Um, but I also have told my patients, like, hey, if you want to intermittent fast 5 days out of the week and take two
Correct.
days off,
Yep.
that's not a bad deal. But I really like the idea of it turning on our longevity genes,
Mhm.
turning on autophagy, because I see a lot of people with chronic infections,
Mhm.
and we have a hard time getting inside of cells in the
Mitochondria.
intracellular area to go after these bacteria and these viruses. So, what better thing to do than supercharge your body to go after it?
Correct. And I think, when you're talking about mitochondrial mechanisms as it relates to intermittent fasting, I think that's a really important qualifier. So, for those that are listening and maybe aren't familiar, mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. So, when you have, chronic diseases or chronic, infections, it can impact the ability of those cells to function really effectively. And so, there's so many benefits to fasting. And as Tom said, you don't necessarily have to do it every single day. That's the most amazing thing about intermittent fasting is it's flexible. And so sometimes I'll say to people, if you like, Easter is a good example. I'm sure there are people who had breakfast, probably had a small lunch, and probably had a nice Easter dinner. And that's totally okay. That's the really cool thing is you don't have to be super rigid about it for it to be effective. You still garner the benefits, even if you're not doing it 7 days a week. As you mentioned, 5 days out of the week, if you're doing it, and then 2 days you have a widened feeding schedule is totally fine. And I think that's really critical because sometimes that amount of flexibility can make someone say yes as opposed to no.
Hmm. Well, I think the other thing that comes up for me too is it's sometimes hard in the beginning, but the actual sensation of hunger is actually a good thing because we're increasing some of our, you know, of our, AMPK, which is sort of like
Hmm.
it's the opposite of our gas tank. As our gas
Hmm.
goes down, this goes up. And this really triggers us to get into this healing state, and
Hmm.
so we need to stress our body with things like exercise and, you know, maybe going out in the world and doing things, but then we need to rejuvenate and build, and we can turn it on even better this way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, for anyone that's listening, if you haven't tried intermittent fasting before, I mean, this is probably a perfect time to try it out. You're N of one. Maybe you can get your spouse or your significant other to do it with you. And sometimes having that social support can make it a whole lot easier. And you don't have to start off doing 16 hours. You could just do 13 or 14 and see how you feel and kind of go from there.
One of the things that I always point out is that adults really need to be sleeping
Hmm.
somewhere in the average of 8 to 9 hours a night. I know a few
Hmm.
people like to, or maybe a lot, like to get less, but we really, the research shows you need that time to
Hmm.
sleep. So it's beautiful. Let's say you don't even believe me, but you'll take 8 hours. Now, if you stop eating 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed, which isn't too hard to do, then you wake up, you've got 11 hours of your 13-hour fast done. And if you do a little bit of work in the morning or take the dogs for work, next thing you know, it's noon and you're already at 16 hours.
Yeah.
So to me, I use it as a way to trigger people to remember they need to go to sleep on time.
I think that's a great suggestion. And I hope everyone is sleeping in. I mean, that's one of the things. I'm usually like a 4:30, 5 a.m. jump out of bed, go to the gym person.
Oh my God.
And so
No,
I've
no,
been
thank you.
sleeping. No, I've been sleeping till 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. My kids are astounded. They're like, Mom never sleeps in. And I said, I think one of the benefits of this time right now is I can't jump in the car and go to the gym. So I sleep in and I've been enjoying it. I mean, this may be a whole new, a whole new me sleeping in. This is completely different than what I've been doing for years, but I agree with you. It's really easy when you factor in at least 7 to 8 hours a night of really high quality sleep into that fasting window. And people realize it's really not that hard. It's just, the mindset shift to understand that you're not going to die not eating breakfast. Because I think I think we grew up with our mothers telling us breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which was probably embedded in them by, the Kellogg's or one of the other
Exactly, right?
cereal companies.
It's interesting. You said something that I think is really important to touch on is like, was it your grandmother or whatever said, hey, just, starve a fever or whatever it is. I'm like, my grandmother says something like that, but it
Yes.
was like, but then it kind of in that conversation, we're talking about listening to your body.
Hmm.
And you've even said that with the fasting. It sounds like there's days where you should, don't worry about it. And other
Right.
days where, push through it.
And I think, yes. And I think we have gotten so disconnected from our bodies. We really have been conditioned that we don't know better. And yet, intrinsically, if we listen to our bodies, just the example I just gave of I'm listening to my body, I'm getting more sleep. That's what my body needs right now. I'll be able to fight off an infection much more easily if I'm well rested. And the same goes for, anything that we're doing right now in terms of our self-care, that whether it's, recognizing maybe one day you feel like you need more carbohydrates, and the next day you feel like you need a little bit more protein, just allowing yourself the ability to be flexible as opposed to being rigid. And I think that rigid dogma is just as detrimental as the mindset that we can't evolve, shift, and change. And so this is a great opportunity to change some of the self-care things that we're doing. Try something new for ourselves. I certainly have been tinkering away myself. I'm like my N of one. I definitely enjoy, seeing what works, what doesn't work, trying new things out.
Nice. So, um, this is amazing, and I know you and I can talk for days on end about all this stuff. I just so love it. Speaking of trying new things, I think that there's at least a handful of people, and if not, maybe everybody's ahead of the game. But what about the glasses?
Yes. So everyone's probably wondering why I'm wearing these funky glasses. So there is blue light that comes out of our electronics. And so this is a perfect example. After 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, I wear blue blocking glasses because the blue light that comes out of our electronics dysregulates, there you go, dysregulates the secretion of a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin is what tells our bodies it's time to go to bed. So if I sit in front of a computer at this time of night, not only will I not be able to fall asleep, I'm going to get like a second wind
Hmm.
shortly, and then I won't be able to go to bed. So I really endeavor, and my kids laugh at me. I sit in my bed or wherever we are. Um, I sit in my bed at night, or if we're watching a movie as a family, I've always got my blue blockers on. It just helps me stay attuned to what my body needs, and also helps, with I'm all about preserving melatonin. That's why I get out in the sun first thing in the morning to support the circadian rhythm. And so that's why I'm wearing these awesome glasses.
They are super awesome, and I will admit I usually wear them, but when I do things like this, I often don't want to deal with the reflection. But
Mm-hmm.
so what I'm going to take some melatonin as soon as I'm done, and then
Smart.
get and turn it back down, because it's so important. So Cynthia, I can't thank you enough for making the time to join us for this, and
Yeah.
really just I've learned so much about intermittent fasting through all the times we've talked, and it's really nice to talk to other people who are so passionate about health, but then also realize that there's a real life that we're all living, and it doesn't. And moderation, not deprivation, might be something I need to borrow from you.
Please do. It's actually, I think it's comforting for people to understand that even though we're all healthcare providers, we're all real people. We're all navigating this time, and trying to make sense of it, and trying to be examples to our children and our significant others and our patients.
Hmm.
And so I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to connect with everyone tonight.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, and we'll definitely do it again. And all the best to you and your family. And I'm sure we'll
Thank
be.
you.
This is, I just can't, I just, everybody who's joined in for the mini series, both attending and the people who are coming on as experts, I just want to, I'm starting off with heartfelt gratitude, not saving it till the end. I'm just so thankful that everybody's here to help. So we will talk to you soon, Cynthia. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.